People react to fear, not love. A quote by Richard Nixon that directly describes government tactics since the beginning of civilization. People are more likely to blindly follow a government during a time of crisis when fear is emerging than on a regular occasion. Corruption within the government creates leaders taking advantage of its citizens' fears in order to gain the upper hand and retain infinite power. Government tend to exaggerate threats in order to heighten citizens' fear. They also flaunt their power and authority in order to create obedience. Many famous politicians use fear as a means of control. Voters tend to choose strong leaders with promises of diminishing fear and resolving conflict. But what happens when politicians are the one creating the fear? Many politicians have tried to tackle the problem of terrorism, including George Bush, who first declared the war on terrorism. Since the devastating attack on September 11, 2001, Americans have lived in fear of their safety and future attacks. With the whole country living in fear, this is the perfect time for a fear-mongering president with big plans to come into office. The most recent and famous president to use fear tactics to control their country is the only Donald Trump. He's a fast-talking, loudmouth president with what seems to be a fear of immigrants and foreigners. Trump is famous for threatening to build a wall between U.S. and Mexico. This wall would stop immigrants and refugees from entering the United States. Due to the Trump era, the American dream is only now available to Americans. In the beginning of his time in office, he had little support for the suspension of the refugee program, a program which helps relocate and settle immigrants and refugees in the States. Now 55% of Americans support the suspension of the refugee program because they are scared for their safety. Trump uses any chance he gets to lecture Americans on how immigrants and those from other countries are untrustworthy and relocated to cause crime. He says stuff like, Islam hates us, Mexicans will bring crime, drugs, and rape, and even called for a total and complete shutdown of the Muslim people entering the United States. With a president claiming that all foreigners are out to get Americans, people are bound to be afraid. American citizens are more afraid of terrorist attacks and immigrants than ever before, and we have Donald Trump to blame for that. In the past, governments have taken extreme measures to create obedience in its citizens. One of the most terrifying is the use of capital punishment. This is the ultimate punishment to any crime. Governments exercise the power and prove they are in charge in hopes to scare their citizens into obedience. According to Michael Summers, Ph.D., capital punishment is an effective way to scare people into abiding laws. His study examined the relationship between the number of executions and the number of murders in the U.S. from 1979 to 2004. His findings showed that each execution cost 74 fewer murders the following year. He found that there is a negative correlation showing that an increase in executions leads to a decrease in murder and vice versa. This proves that the use of capital punishment leads to a more obedient citizen. As proven by Mr. Summers, if citizens have to face weighted and life-threatening consequences, then they will be less likely to commit a crime. It is no one's right to take away someone's life. The government should not be able to pick and choose who receives the death penalty. With governments enforcing the death penalty, criminals are less likely to commit greater crimes such as aggravated murder, treason, major drug trafficking, and various other crimes against the state, which are all punishable by death in certain states in America today. A death sentence is more terrifying than life in jail. Governments cause their country to live in fear of committing various crimes, therefore leading up to less major crimes and more obedient citizens. A scared citizen is an obedient citizen. Citizens should not be living in fear in their daily lives because of their government. Fear-mongering should be illegal, and citizens should be able to make better judgment choices without fear clouding their minds. Not all immigrants and refugees are terrorists. Most are good people seeking sanctuary and have dreams of starting a new life. Trump and other government officials should not scare citizens into having different opinions and feelings towards people or situations. Lastly, nobody, including the government, has the right to take someone's life no matter the severity of their crimes. We need to see through our fear and keep corrupt officials out of the government.